Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903.
As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor, and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Happy Wednesday, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and more exciting news out of the Supreme Court today. Of course, we are still waiting for the Dobbs opinion, which likely will be tomorrow or possibly Monday. Tomorrow, of course, is the last day that the Supreme Court has calendared for an opinion day, but Monday is the last day of their term, so it is possible that if they don't want the Dobbs opinion to be released going into the weekend, they could add an opinion day Monday. So, of course, we will have a special edition show tomorrow to talk about anything that the Supreme Court does release in their opinion and some analysis of Dobbs. And if they choose to release it tomorrow, of course, we will have that analysis here. But today, I want to talk about the important case that the Supreme Court released among four opinions, which was, of course, the New York City case and the New York State case, rather, that is protecting the right to keep and bear arms. We also want to talk about earlier this week, there were rules that were changed with transgender participation in swimming and college sports. So I have my guest standing by, Pedro Gonzalez, who's a great columnist, had a great piece in Newsweek Opinion this week that we want to get to. But first, let's talk about this Supreme Court case. So this is New York State Rifle and Pistol Association Incorporated versus Bruin. So others of you who watch this show ask me all the time, where can we go find these opinions? You can always just go to the Supreme Court website, supremecourt.gov. You can see all of the opinions that they've issued this term. Read those opinions for yourself, even if you just read the first opening paragraphs that are in the majority opinion. That will give you exactly what the Supreme Court is holding for themselves, not just the analysis from me or anybody else. So this is what the Supreme Court said. The state of New York makes it a crime to possess a firearm without a license, whether inside or outside of the home. An individual who wants to carry a firearm outside his home may obtain an unrestricted license to, quote, have and carry a concealed pistol or revolver if he can prove that proper cause exists for doing so. That was the New York state law. And an applicant satisfies that proper cause requirement only if he can, quote, demonstrate a special need for self-protection distinguishable from that of the general community. So that was the question at issue in this case. Does an individual who is seeking to have a concealed carry permit for a firearm in the state of New York have to demonstrate that they want to exercise that constitutionally protected right and justify it? So a 6-3 majority of Supreme Court justices, and the majority opinion was written by Justice Thomas, said no. Absolutely not. An individual does not have to demonstrate that they have proper cause and show why they should be allowed by the state to exercise their constitutionally protected right. So, because of the 14th Amendment's incorporation clause that requires that states follow and protect the same Bill of Rights and the same rights, and has the Constitution that the United States Constitution that has now been incorporated to the states. Now the states have to follow that and protect the Second Amendment just as much as the federal government does. And so the holding here is that New York's proper cause requirement violates the 14th Amendment, that incorporation doctrine, by preventing law-abiding citizens with ordinary self-defense needs from exercising their Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms in public for self-defense. And so I want to point out one other highlight from the majority opinion. Justice Thomas, who is such a national treasure, he goes on and writes that historical analysis can sometimes be difficult and nuanced, but reliance on history to inform the meaning of constitutional text is more legitimate and more administratable than asking judges to make difficult empirical judgments about the costs and benefits of firearms restrictions, especially given their lack of expertise in the field. And he cites to the McDonald case, which of course also was citing to Heller. And he goes on to say that federal courts tasked with making difficult empirical judgments regarding firearm regulations under the banner of intermediate scrutiny often defer to determinations of legislatures. While judicial deference to legislative interest balancing is understandable and elsewhere appropriate, is not deference that the Constitution demands here. And this is what's incredibly important. The Second Amendment is, quote, and he's quoting Heller, is the very product of an interest balancing by the people, and it surely elevates above all other interests the right of law-abiding, responsible citizens to use arms for self-defense. So Justice Thomas, national treasure. Justice Alito wrote a concurrence that basically just absolutely obliterated the leftist judge's dissent by saying and pointing to different statistics, saying, well, look at these mass shootings, look at the suicide rate. And he's saying, okay, those statistics, though, have no rational correlation to the issue here, which is that law-abiding citizens don't have to prove or justify why they want to keep and bear arms and have a concealed carry permit outside the home. Because just because someone gets a concealed carry permit outside the home, that doesn't make anyone more or less likely to use that firearm to commit suicide. And so go and read Justice Alito's concurrence for yourself. Read the majority opinion yourself. But the bottom line is, this is a great day for the U.S. Constitution that a majority 6-3 of Supreme Court justices are recognizing that the constitutionally protected right to keep and bear arms is sacrosanct, and they are not going to allow the government to make you justify why you are going to exercise your rights. So I'm going to bring on my guest now, Pedro Gonzalez, who is a columnist. And Pedro, thanks so much for joining. And I know we want to get into your Newsweek opinion piece, but first I want to ask your reaction to this Supreme Court opinion today.
Well, like you said, the Alito response is fantastic because he specifically says that the liberals were citing the Buffalo shooting as one of these incidents that mandates are basically acquiescing to more gun control. And Alito rightly points out that the New York law in question did not stop the shooting in Buffalo, obviously. So that is great. Obviously, like you said, today is a great day. But on the other hand, it's also a very bad day because thanks to a handful of Republicans, namely Mitch McConnell and John Cornyn, this federal gun control bill has advanced. It's probably going to pass. And the most important aspect of this is that it's going to incentivize states through grant money to enact red flag laws. That is extremely alarming. I think it's difficult to exaggerate how much trouble this could cause for normal people in the future. I mean, you've got guys like Eric Swalwell openly saying that red flag laws could be used to disarm people he disagrees with. I mean, he would conflate the average American who disagrees with him with an extremist. But basically, if you don't think that red flag laws are going to be politicized, then you haven't been paying attention to the FBI, the DOJ, and everything else that's been going on. Republicans are patting themselves on the back over this. So it's an interesting time because, on the one hand, you have this victory from the Supreme Court, but on the other hand, the GOP is still basically kind of undermining that whole thing by working with Biden and the Democratic Party to advance this. And I think the Washington Times put it very well that this is a massive win for Biden.
Yeah, and so well said. And isn't it just disgusting and frankly shocking when the non political branch of the court is conserving the rule of law more than the partisan party that alleges that we're the party of the Constitution and the Republicans? I mean, that's
Yeah,
just so sad when
yeah,
you have the Supreme Court that is supposed to be and is, unbiased, non political. They're supposed to simply apply the law to the fact and interpret the Constitution. And yet it's the GOP senators that are so malleable and they're so afraid of being called names by the mainstream media that they're willing to bend over and they're willing to have this type of bipartisan legislation that is undermining the very amazing decision that we
right.
had from the court today. So,
Yeah.
where do you think this leaves the GOP now in these 14 senators in the predicament after the Supreme Court has made this excellent ruling today?
It's an egg on their face. I think, especially Alito. Alito, I think it's right to basically take what Alito wrote, print it out, and then staple it to the doors of every Republican senator who facilitated this bipartisan bill, because it should be humiliating for them. Because, again, like you said, they're supposed to be on the side of law and order and the Constitution, right? And everything that the conservative justices said is contrary to what these Republicans are saying. And so again, right. And I think this is actually a perfect framing. Mitch McConnell has staked so much of his reputation on judges, judges, judges. Keep voting, no matter how much I suck. Keep voting for me, and you'll get judges, right? Well, the 6 conservative judges on the court completely disagree with McConnell on gun control, and I think that is really the kind of paradox of the moment. And forget the judges. The GOP base is up in arms over this, right? It's actually remarkable how much of a disconnect there is between GOP leadership and most GOP voters on this issue. I mean, John Cornyn got booed, rightly so, at a Texas GOP convention recently, right? But he keeps smiling, And after that incident where he got deservedly booed, he told, I think, a California Democrat, his last name is Padilla, that uh, first we do guns and then we do immigration. And he's referring to an immigration bill that he's working on with Kristen Sinema from Arizona that would essentially amount to, I mean, we call it immigration reform, but it's really just a handout for cheap labor, right? Republicans are doing this despite the fact that they're literally getting booed in public. So you've got the base that's angry at the GOP, and now you've got the Supreme Court that is in disagreement with the GOP. I think these are, again, really bizarre times where the GOP could not be more out of touch with, again, its own voters and its own judges, apparently.
Yeah. So are they just so self-centered and so myopically focused on their own ability to continue doing whatever they want? Are they not worried about getting voted out of office? Are they not worried about actually representing people? And they think that their power, is simply there's no ability for it to be stripped away. I mean, what are these
Yeah.
people possibly thinking
Yeah.
when they have such visceral reaction from their own base?
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I think that they feel comfortable. And unfortunately, they've been proven right that basically they can kind of ride out the storm. And in a few years, all of this will be forgotten. There'll be some other crisis triggered by the Democratic Party that will kind of make us forget that the GOP is just as bad and that they'll be reelected. I mean, John Cornyn was just reelected, right? He gets reelected and then he gets booed. And then he goes on and kind of doubles down by saying, like, you didn't like the gun control. Well, now you're going to get immigration reform. They don't care because they feel safe. And that's why I think that the GOP base really needs to hold on to this grudge. Holding a grudge is a good thing against the Republican Party. Don't forget that they think you're stupid, that they're happy to take your votes and your money, they're fine with getting booed by you because they really think that you're too dumb to remember this in 3 years or 4 years or whatever, and that you're just going to keep voting for them. And I think that's a
Yeah.
huge part of it because, unfortunately, like I said, that actually has been the case. John Cornyn just got reelected.
Yeah. And, and Mitch McConnell, who was endorsed by Trump, and a lot of people were wondering, about
Yes.
that and why, some of the news cycle things only happen in campaign years. And so that's when you see the Mitch McConnells, the Lindsey Grahams, and others who will have, these, and even Ted Cruz, who will go on, Fox News and will say, "Oh, I'm working for the American people." They'll have some great sound bites, and
Yeah.
they're hoping and predicting that the voting base will only focus on the last 5 minutes instead
Yes.
of the last 6 years, 10 years, 60 years of the GOP, but certainly, their whole track record through the course of their entire tenure. And
Yep.
so I think the lesson here, Pedro, is that we need to be more responsible voters, and we need to look at the whole scope of what a person has done in office and not just
Yes.
go based on the last 5 minutes or what the mainstream media, including the conservative networks that want to prop up a lot of these rhinos. And we need to go based on their entire track record and their entire tenure rather than just what they want us to focus on.
Yep. That's right. No, it's really well said.
Yeah, well, we're going to be right back with Pedro Gonzalez because I want to get more into the issue of the transgender swimmer and some of the things that you may not have heard about why that ruling wasn't as great as you might think. And he wrote an excellent piece in a Newsweek opinion that we're going to break down right after this. Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903. And we're back with Pedro Gonzalez, who is the associate editor at Chronicles, a magazine of American culture. But he also had a piece in Newsweek that, and I love the title of this piece, it's Whether We Say It or Not, Our Culture Provides Cover for Groomers. So, Pedro, let's talk about your article first. So,
Yeah.
this opinion piece was actually based in one really horrifying incident. So, so you want to talk about this?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it's not just one. It started with an investigation into a teacher in Philadelphia who allegedly uploaded child pornography to Dropbox. And as he was being investigated by federal authorities, they found that he was part of a network of what they described as like-minded child predators who were creating and distributing child pornography online. And this particular teacher in Philadelphia allegedly pretended to be a teenage girl online and baited several of his own high school and middle school students into sending him nude videos. And during this investigation, they found that he had been in communication, had exchanged thousands of messages with one person in Hawaii who claimed to be a teacher. And so the FBI looked into that. And what they found was that this person worked at a variety of different schools in Hawaii. On Instagram, this was actually, I think I was the first person to report this, but I looked at his Instagram and I noticed that he had claimed an association with the Navy Child and Youth Programs, which it's kind of like, I would say, like the YMCA for military and DoD families, right? So we don't know what kind of relationship he had with that organization, but he just claims some kind of association with them. He taught dance lessons. He ran a kind of under the table photography business, taking high school senior pictures and family photographs. This is someone who had basically won the trust of his victims, of the community. And all the while that was happening, he admitted to investigators that he had been sleeping in particular with one student who he knew was underage. He made a video with this 13-year-old boy, and he sent it to this teacher in Philadelphia. He admitted that he had like recording equipment, like almost like a studio that he did this with. But he also admitted to having had sexual relations with this minor, who was a former student of his, during lunch breaks at school. I mean, and my piece is horrific, but it's actually just the surface, because basically what's implied here is that this is a much bigger network of people. And two of the main ones that have been swept up so far are both teachers. The one in Hawaii was working at a public school when he was caught. He was actually approached by federal authorities while at work at a school. And then he was interviewed there. And that's when he admitted to all this stuff. And the teacher in Philadelphia, he was a math teacher at a prestigious private school. And so again, these guys are part of a network preying on their own students, basically. And in particular, the teacher from Hawaii was outspokenly critical of people using the term groomer. His Twitter is still up. You can go check it out. And there are tweets by him basically accusing people that use the term groomer of actually being secret pedophiles. And that anybody who is against teaching topics about gender and sex in classrooms, well, those people are closeted pedophiles, because you want to keep children dumb about those subjects so that you can prey on them. He was militantly, basically, for the kind of stuff that the parental rights and education law recently outlawed in Florida, which he also attacked on Twitter. And sure enough, the guy was creating and distributing child pornography with his own students.
That is so disgusting and despicable. And yeah, and this whole idea that somehow it's not grooming to have these very adult conversations about sex, and sexual orientation, gender identity, some of these things with children, is completely ignoring the fact that children are still minors. They're not adults, and there is some content that is simply not appropriate
Yep.
for children. And so when we're looking at the broader scope of this, and we're looking at how adults are, and even in some instances parents are, either encouraging this, or they're simply turning a blind eye to what's going on in the classroom. And many parents aren't, but some who would continue to send their children to public schools who have these teachers that are openly on, like, libs of TikTok, that has highlighted
Yep.
all of these parents. I mean, what does it say about the culture and where we're headed with this kind of agenda, when teachers, and of course this is criminal activity, but then even teachers who can openly say and promote that grooming, it shouldn't be used as a term to accurately describe what's going on?
Yeah. Well, I think it's funny. I never actually thought too much about the issue of sex ed until I became a parent. And I think that basically what has happened is, by kind of outsourcing these really intimate conversations that parents are supposed to have with their children, by outsourcing that stuff, because maybe it makes parents in modern times uncomfortable to talk about the birds and the bees or whatever. By outsourcing that, we've actually kind of paved the road for this, because this is what sex ed is now. And so I think that's a huge part of it, right? And maybe we outsourced it because modern day working conditions require both parents basically to work full-time jobs in order to provide for their families. I mean, there's a lot of factors into why this happened, but I actually think that that's one of the root causes here. We have, again, outsourced the responsibilities of parents to teachers, to private and public schools. And this is what happens. And
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, the consequence of this is that we've opened up children to predation. And the people that are doing the preying upon are also the ones that I think, unfortunately, have the culture on their side. This is a point that I made in my piece, is that you don't create child pornography and distribute it online to a network of like-minded predators while publicly denouncing the word groomer and viciously attacking other people as closeted pedophiles, projecting their pedophilia onto others, unless you know, despite your victim narrative, right, that you're marginalized or whatever, unless you know deep down that the culture is on your side, that you've actually got the wind at your back to attack parents who want to protect their children from you. So I
Yeah,
think, I mean, there are so many aspects to this.
yeah, and that's so well put that it's outsourcing parental responsibilities to the state, and that's exactly the Democratic left's agenda is to say that children belong to the state, and it's the state that gets to determine their best interests, and it's the state over and over and over overriding the parents. And if parents are simply complicit in this agenda, then we're giving our parental rights to the state, and then we shouldn't be shocked when the state is going out and um, having this type of conduct in the classroom when
Yeah,
we've just turned a blind eye to it. And I think there
yeah,
is a lot of hope that parents are now waking up to this and getting involved and saying, wait a second, we need to have school choice options, we need to make sure to protect parental rights, because they don't like what's going on. But I think you are absolutely right that when we have started outsourcing to the state, and the state has replaced parents and the family and the church and all of these these spheres of government that God himself has instituted, and we want the state to be responsible for all of it, then are we really surprised when the state isn't handling this how parents would and how parents should? Because
yeah,
the state isn't a
yeah.
parent. The state should not be in that role.
They're
And
doing the
so
opposite.
where do you see this going in terms of, as parents are waking up and we see like what's happening in Virginia with school boards and across the country,
Yeah.
and as a parent yourself, where should this be going and where is this going?
I'm sorry to blurt that out, but I think that's an important point, is actually that the opposite is happening, because the state is acting in many cases to protect these people from parents, right? I mean, the FBI, yeah, we know now that the FBI was flagging exactly these parents that have been going to school board meetings and agitating, been basically flagging them as potential terrorist threats.
Yeah.
I mean, this stuff it's truly dystopian, right? But going back to your point, I think the good news is that people are waking up. People are, in fact, militating, despite the fact that they know they might be getting flagged by the FBI, that they might be getting looked into by the DOJ just for going to a school board meeting and going to war with these teachers and these administrators who either don't care about their children's welfare, or actually, like in the case of these two teachers, have the opposite at heart. So I think that's the good news, is despite the problems with the actual national institutional GOP, the grassroots parents' rights movement, I have never seen it more assertive, more active, and more militant in my life. And I think that's fantastic. And I hope it doesn't stop.
Yeah, I agree. And parents need to get involved and re engage. The church needs to get involved and re engage in their sphere of government as well. And we need to stop just allowing and abdicating our responsibilities and our rights to the state. Because once we give over our rights, it's very, very difficult to get them back. And so, that kind of buttresses in terms of the cultural aspect into this transgender swimming narrative. And, I want to touch on that because earlier this week, of course, I believe it was Monday, the national organization instituted a rule basically banning transgender people from participating in on a swim team on the collegiate level. Of course, this affects Leah Thomas, the biological male, which we should just be saying male, the male who is pretending to be a woman and engaging in female sports
Yeah,
from participating. But the rule here was to say that only people who had not made a transition before the age of 12. So while initially that sounds like a good rule of, hey, at least we're protecting women's sports, isn't that incentivizing parents and children to make a
yeah,
gender transition under the age of 12 when children just are not competent to make these life altering decisions
yeah,
before the age of majority?
yeah. It's incredible. I don't know. I mean, it's difficult to think if was this on purpose? I mean, did you people intend to put transgenderism on the express lane? Because that's basically what these kinds of rulings do. Because it has incentivized completing transition at a younger age and at a faster rate. And a second condition for this is that you have to prove that you've been on continuous uh, drugs. You've been taking drugs to continuously suppress the testosterone in your body. I mean, so basically, we're incentivizing people to transition at an earlier age and to take more of these drugs. That's not a win at all. That's a massive step backwards because other people are going to follow these rules, and it literally creates an incentive structure for this stuff. So no, I think it's actually horrendous. It's I don't know of anybody who's declared it a win. I haven't, but again, I don't know how you could. I mean, maybe at first glance it's like the headline, ruling against transgender women or something like that. But then you actually look at the fine print and it's, oh my God, this is actually encouraging people to transition their kids at a younger age. And I think there's so many aspects of transgenderism that are problematic. And the main one is that study after study after study, and I mean, you don't need studies to know this, but transgenderism is often accompanied by psychiatric comorbidities, other things that are kind of causing, you could say, like anxiety, depression, eating disorders, things like that tend to accompany transgenderism, or in other words, this kind of gender confusion, right? So these people are already kind of in a fragile state of mind for other reasons, but because they've experienced what you could categorize as confusion with their gender identity, you want to fast track them onto hormones and puberty suppressors and irreversible surgery. I mean, this is, I don't like to use analogies about the Nazis. This is probably the first time that I'm going to use this, but like this is the kind of like weird Nazi experimentation stuff that we saw in the past, like subjecting children to mastectomies. And there was a study published in the last few years that actually recommended mastectomies for children as young as 13. I mean, this stuff is permanent. There's no coming back from this, and we're actually paving the road for this stuff.
Yeah, and it also reminds me of FGM, which is the female genital mutilation that happens
Yeah,
in other countries, and of course, the United States was one of the countries that condemns that, which I find in this context to be so ironic that
yeah,
we're saying that female genital mutilation, and usually the countries that do that, it's for some religious purpose often, or it's some of these sects that will say that women having pleasure during sex is somehow against their religious conduct, and so they
yeah,
have this FGM that they will literally mutilate
yes,
women's genitals so that they don't experience anything during sex, and it's disgusting, it's heinous, and it's a very adult topic for that's happening to small children. But then I'm thinking, okay, we're condemning that, and the feminists and the left is saying that's so heinous, but you're literally doing the exact same thing, maybe
yeah,
just for a different purpose. You're claiming it's for the purpose of, finding my true self, and it's for advocating and being allies to these young kids. But the practical effect is literally exactly the same thing. When you have young females who are cutting off their breasts, when you have these men, these boys who are getting irreversible surgery when they're literally being castrated, and yet that's somehow in the United States now lauded as we need to start doing this younger and younger, and parents
yeah.
are affirming their children. I just find that so incredibly, disgustingly hypocritical.
Yep. No, that's exactly right. And I think it's really important to note this this basically we're moving guardrails for the process of transitioning and we're imposing them for the process of detransitioning. There was a survey done recently with surgeons who are part of these two organizations. One is international, it's called WPATH, and the other one is US based, it's called US Path. These are two organizations that focus specifically on transgender medicine. And the surveys were conducted among surgeons who attended WPATH's 2016 conference and US Path's 2017 conference. And it asked them basically, would you require psychiatric intervention for patients who want to begin the process of detransitioning, of reversing this stuff, right? 98% said yes. I would want to require them to see a psychiatrist before we begin detransitioning them. And these are the same people that are saying that it's oppressive to recommend that the first line that you have to go through if you want to transition is to see a psychiatrist. So they're not actually liberating us from anything. They're not removing the gatekeeper. They're actually just kind of changing the locks and locking younger and younger people into this track that only goes one way towards these. It's and the people that say that puberty suppressors or that whatever happens is reversible. Same with hormones. It's not. I
It's
mean,
not.
talk to people that have gone through detransitioning. They will tell you that this stuff is with them forever.
Yeah, and it's so terrible. And to have, I mean, I do think as much as obviously I would openly advocate against, anyone trying to change their gender. You can't change an immutable characteristic. It's not just assigned at birth. God made us male and female. But if an adult wants to make that choice for themselves, that is a very different ethical and moral question than it is for a child and for someone, for parents to support this type of thing. And so I think it's a really big lesson. And the reason that I wanted to highlight this today was because when we're talking about, rules and conservatives lauding different opinions, we have to make sure that we're reading these thoroughly, because I did see a lot of people on social media, initially because of the headlines, saying, oh, they're now transgender swimmers aren't going to be allowed to participate in women's sports, going, great, we're lauding this, but they didn't
Yeah.
take time to read through it. And initially, I mean, my reaction to the headline was initially the same, like, oh, great, this is great. But we do have to read the fine print. We do have to say, okay, what is this opinion actually saying? And is this good precedent? And what is it commenting on society as a whole? And Pedro, we really need to protect our young kids and make sure that we are not making these life altering decisions based on just absolute lies and giving big pharma an entirely new generation of elective patients. So,
Yep.
where do you think that conservatives and parents can best be engaged to try to reverse this disgusting trend?
Well, apart from the most immediate thing, which is, showing up to your local government, showing up to your school board meetings and stuff like that, I think that the other aspect of this is to simply, in your own life, not be afraid to say, like, no, transgenderism is simply there's something fundamentally bad about this. That it's because I think conservatives will kind of try to draw a line because understandably they're worried about getting attacked and slandered as a bigot, and so they'll say, well, okay, 13 is too young, but 16 is just right for transitioning and things like that. It's like, no, you've already accepted the premise, right? That people can just snap their fingers and men can become women by mutilating themselves and pumping themselves filled with these horrible drugs, right? You've already accepted that premise, so you've already lost. And I think it's important to not be afraid to reject the entire premise and to also be to understand that that's not obviously not the same as like hating the individual. I don't hate these trans kids and these people that are going. I feel horrible for these people.
Yes.
Like when I see parents that push their kids to transition, I feel awful for those children, and I wonder why those parents would do that to their kids. It's inexplicable to me as a parent, right? And this is child abuse. So I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest thing is if you're a conservative, stop being afraid and stand your ground on this stuff and don't accept the premise, because once you do that, everything else goes.
Yeah, so well said. Absolutely. So, Pedro Gonzalez, thank you so much for joining me today, for your insights and for continuing to have the courage to speak truth. I know that for everyone listening, it's always very encouraging to everyone else who's listening, who's thinking, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't, participate in this conversation because I don't want to offend anybody, or they may be timid. But to have people like you and so many others who are willing to stand boldly and write these types of pieces, have these types of comments, and to simply stand for truth. I mean, that's what it is all about, is to make sure that we are standing for the truth. We continue to speak the truth boldly and encourage others to as well, because, majorities matter. And the more that we continue to stand firm, that will be attractive to other people who know that they should
Yes.
be. They just kind of need to feel like they're not the only ones who are out there. So, really appreciate it. Where can people follow you and find your work? And so, you're an associate editor at Chronicles, a magazine of American culture.
Yeah. So you can go to chroniclesmagazine.org and find my column Theory of a Partisan there. And I'm on pretty much every social media platform under the same handle at EMERITICUS, Emeriticus. So yeah, I've got a newsletter too at contra.substack.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Look forward to having you on again soon.
Thank you so much.
I also want to talk about another great American who is the sponsor of this podcast. And that, of course, is my good friend, Mike Lindell. He has been canceled out of so many box stores for simply standing up for his own political opinion. And disagree or not, or support him or not, It is a fundamental right of every American to be able to voice their opinion, and that absolutely includes politics. That absolutely includes issues that are central to our culture. That includes faith. Mike is such a very sincere Christian, and I am proud to consider him a friend, and he is, of course, a friend of this show. So right now, there is a special on mypillow.com. Click on the new radio listener specials. Get deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including a great towel set, which is a 6-piece set. It includes 2 bath, 2 hand towels, 2 washcloths, made in the USA, regularly $109.99, now just $39.99, but you have to use the promo code Jenna. That's Jenna. That tells Mike that you listen to this show, you're happy that he is a sponsor of this show, and you will get great discounts, but use the promo code Jenna, that's Jenna, either at mypillow.com or call 1-800-564-8475 and use the promo code Jenna.